Let's have a look at what caused this. The number 57, as we take our Toyota instant replay, just launched over the top of the curbing, coming down through the S's, hits the wall there and comes back for a second hit at the wall. How lucky was the Trevor Crowe number 44 car going through, and also another of the BMW Motorsport entries. I must say the driver was okay. There is Lucio Cesario, as we called, the driver who has stuck the Caltex Alpha into the wall, and that was a pretty hard hit. Yellow flags continue to be waved, and of course the crash vehicles, the pickup trucks, are able to go to the scene of the accident, and no longer will the drivers have to deal with having a race in behind the tender vehicles here at Mount Panorama. World Championship rules, I think it's a great idea.
What should happen at the end of the pace car situation, Mike, it will turn its lights off and then do one more lap. So when the lights turn off, it's just got one more lap to do.
Well, we'll follow that. On the Castrol scoreboard, Klaus Ludwig is the race leader. Andrew Madecki in second. Steve Soper is third. Alan Grice is fourth. Jimmy Richards is fifth. Sixth place, that will change. Johnny Cicotto Brancatelli. Seventh is Seaton and Bowe. Eighth, Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finauer. Ninth is the farmer, George Fury and Terry Shield. And 10, John Crook and Peter McLeod and the Mobile Commodore.
Field here after 47 laps in the James Hardie 1000 for 1987. The reason, car 57, the Colin Bond Caltex Alpha with Lucio Cesario at the wheel, into the wall at the S's. There's car 35. Don Smith has taken over the wheel now from Andrew Madecki. Second placed on the track, but they've taken advantage of this, of course, to come into the pits. But, well, it depends on how it's going to pan out for them, whether it's a good move or a bad one.
I would say it's a bad move. If they got a serious problem with the car, because the pace car is lapping so much slower than normal, they would have actually saved time, but because it was just a short stop, they're obviously losing time. You can see that he's sitting there waiting, and he's going to have to rejoin at the back of the field.
Yeah, okay, but now Bill Brown, sitting at home watching this, knows that Madecki, when the pace car went out, was in second place on the racetrack. Where is he now?
A good question, and we'll sort that one out once racing starts. But what will happen is he will be at least one lap down.
Okay.
So you can expect him probably to be in somewhere around about 8th or 9th
In other words, he goes back out on the tail of the field.
That's right, and of course he's lost a lap while the pace car is out there. The other interesting thing, though, is the way that it closes the field up. What you should expect to see happen is at the end, as we were saying before the break, the pace car will switch its lights off on its final lap and do one lap with the lights, the flashing lights on the roof, extinguished. And at that point, he will then wave past all the cars that are in front of the lead car. So Klaus Niedzwitz will then take up the position behind the pace car until the pace car then pulls in, which allows the cars that are between Niedzwitz and the pace car to catch back up.
Right, and that's exactly what's happening down there. I don't know whether Don Smith's quite clear on the situation either, but it's being explained to him. Andrew Madecki giving him some words of advice about how the car is handling.
The other thing that the turbos don't like is that they don't particularly like having to slow down like this. It doesn't really help a turbocharged car to go too slowly, and they are going very slowly. On the other hand, one man's going to be delighted. That's going to be Win Percy. His car's overheating. This is one chance he's got, with a bit of luck, to let it cool off a bit.
Here comes the pace car down Conrod Straight. The field tailing out behind it. They're still trying to remove the 57 car from up in the S's. I would imagine that probably when they go through this time, they will allow the cars in the pit lane, including 35, Don Smith, to come out and rejoin at the rear of the field.
Yeah, that's what they'll do. I think they'll also probably take the opportunity to tidy up a few more cars that have stopped around the circuit as well. This is why there is a number of wreckers out on the circuit. It's a very different story to last year when, of course, there wasn't a pace car situation in the days gone by, and we had people being towed in from around the circuit. Well, of course, that doesn't happen anymore.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, yes. I must say that was the first thing that I saw when I first came here last year, and I thought, goodness me, you just can't get away with that. But they did.
Obviously, with the introduction of the pace car and with this system, Richard Neville, Australian drivers need to learn a whole lot more about tactics in this situation.
Indeed they do. I have a feeling that the car number 35, the Andrew Madecki Don Smith car, may possibly have been under different ideas as to how the rules worked, and that's why he would have pitted then. I can't believe that at this stage of the race he'd require fuel again. He pitted around about 30 laps, so you wouldn't expect him to pit some 15 or so laps later. So there's Bryn Percy there, and as we were saying, he's looking fairly happy.
Quite happy. And
one man who won't be happy, of course, is Klaus Ludwig. Not only is there just a simple problem with or relatively simple problem with keeping the turbo cool, he must have terrible memories of the Le Mans 24-hour race in 1986. He'd won the race in 84 and 85. He was leading again for a hat-trick in 86. And then disaster struck. There was a pace car situation for around 2 hours. And Ludwig's car suffered from exactly the problems we were discussing, overheating and so on, and that caused the demise of that car, having to spend so long at such a slow speed.
The Bajan Bauquet New Zealand skyline has been into the pits and is now coming out onto pit road to join that tail of cars that will come out on the end of the field. And I see that car 40, the BMW of Ratzenberger and Oostenrijk, has also called into the pits to take advantage of the pace car being on the track. They're certainly taking their time, and it looks like, you know, his 47 is in trouble. The girls, Meversen and Sturmitz.
And that's Annette Meversen at the wheel at the moment, with the white helmet on.
Well, she surely couldn't have gone off while the pace car was out.
You never know. She stalled the car, apparently.
I think that it's probably... I think it's probably fairly likely that what she was actually doing was trying to stay out there for as long as possible while the pace car was out. And I would think that the idea was that if she didn't have to make a pit stop while the car was out there, everything would be good.
Car 4, Stanfield Car Radio's entry, going past there, Michelle Delcourt and Graham Moore.
Well, the pace car still out on the circuit. It has also given all of the crews an opportunity to pull in the Larry Perkins car and some of the other cars stranded on the circuit.
Caltex chase, the cars wending their way down to that point on the track, and the pace car is still out. It really has cast a whole new complexion over events here at Mount Panorama for 1987. Car 3 there, just in behind the pace car, of course, is Peter Jansen and Peter Fitzgerald, but don't make the mistake of believing that they are leading the race when things restart. Of course, that's not the case. All the cars between the pace car and car 7, the Eggenberger Texaco, driven by Klaus Ludwig, will have to slip by the pace car and pick up on the tail of the field. Let's update for you now how the field is running in the great race. Klaus Ludwig is the race leader. Steve Soper, Eggenberger's 1-2 at this stage. Win Percy runs third in the Alan Grice Commodore. Fourth spot is Jimmy Richards, the Australian touring car champion. Fifth spot, Andrew Madecki, now down a lap. And Don Smith behind the wheel. Ben Seaton in sixth spot in the first of the Nissans, also a lap down after 48 laps. Robbie Francevic in the second of the JPS BMWs, a lap down as well, followed by George Fury in the second Nissan car. John Crook in the second of the mobile team cars. Of course, Peter Brock 05 off the track and not operating at the moment. And then Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio in 10th spot, the BMW. In 11th spot, 42. John Franco Brancatelli in the BMW M3. And 12th, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the second OXO car. 13th is veteran Murray Carter in the Netcom car, sharing with Steve Masterton. In 14th spot, car number 37, the Speedway boys, Brian Callahan and Barry Graham. They're down 2. 15th is Graham Cameron and Wayne Wilkinson in car number 19. Gary Scott and Akihiko Nakaya, car 16 in 16th spot, the Mitsubishi, followed by Trevor Crowe and Ian Tulloch from New Zealand in the BMW, 2 laps down, these guys, of course. Annette Meversen and Mercedes Sturmitz, 3 laps down and maybe a little more because we saw them park off the circuit a few moments ago. Position 19, Peter Jansen and Peter Fitzgerald, the Holden Commodore, and in position number 20, Graham Moore and Michelle Delcourt, also in a Commodore and 3 laps down. Tony Noski and Gary Rush next, position 21, 3 laps down in their Commodore, followed by Cabbage and Kerry Bailey, position 22. Position 23, Bill O'Brien and Brian Sampson. Position 24, Tony Mulvihill and Ken Matthews. Position 25, Steve Reed and Trevor Ashby. Holden's holding down positions 21 to 25 there. Position 26, Phil Ward, Lyndon Reithmuller in the Mercedes, 4 laps down, as are father and son, Gulson and Gulson in the BMW, position 27. Position 28, Marcus Ostreich and Roland Ratzenberger down 5 laps in their BMW. Position 29, John Faulkner and Drew Price in the Toyota, leading their category, of course, in the small car class, followed by John Smith and John Faulkner in position 30 for car 91. Then Andrew Bignell and Mark Jennings in position 31, David Radcliffe and Mark Gibbs in position 32, 6 laps down in their Toyota Corolla. Then in position 33, car 46, Emmanuel Pirro and Roberta Ravalia, their race run for the day, I'd say. 7 laps down on the leaders at this stage. Then Winnie Vaught and Olivia Gruyard in the BMW car 43, holding down 34th spot. And in position 35, Giorgio Francia in the Alfa, 8 laps down.
36 on the road. Ken Bajan, Graham Bowkett in the Nissan down 11 laps. 37th, 60, Mark Scaife and Grant Jarrett in the Nissan. In 38th spot, and of course retired, the Brock Parsons Commodore. 39th, Bond and Cesario with their retired car. And of course Bob Holden and Gary Wilmington in the Toyota. 41, Moffat and Rouse. That's when the car went out just a little while back. 42nd spot, 32, Cullen and Sprague. 43, Arman Hahn and Kevin Bartlett. 44, Lusty and Lusty. 45th, Billington and Graham Crosby. And rounding them out, Dick Johnson, Larry Perkins and Neville Crichton, who of course triggered off that accident in the first lap. I'd like to thank our race score boys for bringing you up to date. Those positions are confirmed. And the pace car, I would think, would probably have one more lap around here. The former James Hardie 1000 winner, Bobby Morris, is in fact driving the pace car.
1976, of course, Bobby Morris won this race with John Fitzpatrick. A welcome return for him to Mount Panorama.
To Mount Panorama at Bathurst, World Touring Car Round. James Hardie 1000 pace car, still on the circuit. As you can see, the tender vehicle taking one of those damaged cars back to the pit area at the moment. And of course, the pace car might be something new to our Australian touring car followers here, but it is used extensively in Europe. One man who will be able to tell us not only about that, but also what they do in the States is Alan Grice, and he's in the pit studio with Neil Crompton.
Yes, indeed, Mike Raymond. I think it's now a time, Alan Grice, where your international experience will come to the fore. We've seen a situation where the yellow flag has come out, and in some cases there's been a misunderstanding in the interpretation of the rules.
Yes, there are two pace cars or techniques used in different forms of racing in the world. One is the NASCAR pace car system, whereby you can rush into the pits and get back on. As long as the pace car hasn't gone past you, you can catch onto the field and catch them up and not lose a lap. But the FISA interpretation of the pace car rules differs, as do all of their interpretations. And in this instance, if you come into the pits, you lose a lap because you're not allowed to rejoin and catch the field. So it means that you have to, if you come into the pits, you have to wait until the pace car does a complete lap, and of course you lose a lap. Right. We lost a lap the same way at Spa in the 24-hour race with the Works BMWs. Just missed getting out, and you lose a lap.
Now the situation with your car, we were looking earlier on at some fairly graphic shots on Seven's Bob Jane race cam, and we saw some needles that were hanging up there in the red, and I understand you were getting a low water light, but somewhere along the line the computation isn't right.
Yeah, that's right. The needle that's in the red is the gearbox temperature. That's not unusual. Of course, a race like this, we start with a brand new box with tight clearances and new bearings, etc. And it's not unusual that the temperature starts high, and as the race goes on, the temperature comes down. The water temperature light, the low water light on the left that you saw flashing, there we can see it on screen. I don't know, but it doesn't look like it's flashing. Yes, it is still flashing. That indicates that the water level in the head is low, but the water temperature is not high. So the only thing we can put it down to is a faulty connection.
Well, Gracie, the situation now is the pace car has moved away and the race is back on. Would you at all like to have a chat with Wynne? Because we can probably arrange it for you through our Bob Jane race cam.
Yeah, I guess it'll take him a lap though to get himself back in the swing of things. He's you know, he's now got to get the car straight back up to race speed and get past and try and stay with those Fords. And unfortunately, the Sierras, with the enormous amount of grunt they've got in a straight line, it makes them easier for them to pass the cars.
Nevertheless, you must be really thrilled at the performance of the car. You're up to third. The car was the short wheelbase version as little as 24 hours ago. It's flying.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the motor car. Obviously, that blinking light's a worry, but we can only put it down to about faulty connection.
Well, let's ask the man himself. Wynne Percy, what's the situation at the moment?
Well, I believe the situation is that we should stay behind the foil for one lap after the flashing lights go off. Your guys are now displaying green flags, and I don't really want to take the risk of overtaking. That's the problem.
Yeah, with green flags, it's got to mean go, though, Wynne.
For sure?
Yes, sir.
OK, I'm going.
Go for it, Winnie.
Well, that's the best cue I've ever seen. When the boss says go for it, you can get stuck into it.
Well, we'll find out. So, we follow Wynne Percy in the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore.
Well, green flags mean go in any book in the world, and he's going for it.
They certainly are.
Gracie, I'm really surprised, to be quite frank, that you've been able to get the car back in the same sort of shape as you started the weekend. Have you noticed any little tweaks or traits in the car that weren't there when you started?
No, the Hardie's Hero lap, the car was certainly not tracking properly. It was going from one side of the road to the other down Conrod. But that was a settling that was taking place with the new chassis rail that we put in. And a wheel alignment fixed that.
Robbie Francevic to the pits, the 1986 Australian Touring Car Champion. He hands over to Ludwig Finua on our Motorcraft pit report. And Goopy about to have his first attack on Mount Panorama.
Yeah, well, that's a good time to pit, really, because he hasn't lost his lap and the car's a bunch, so he'll get out and the bunch he'll have some clear road when he gets out there.
The other information right behind that, you'll see that Jimmy Richards has come in as well, Alan and Neil.
Well, that's
held him up for maybe 10 seconds, I would think.
Yeah, that's a little car like that. 10 seconds is very, very valuable. A bit of a miscue there, I think.
Well, we'll see how good the stop is. We've got the clocks on them. Frank Gardner presiding at the front of the car. Tony Longhurst strapping in. The combination looked so strong in the Castrol 500 at Sandown only a couple of weeks back, and then right at the end it was an engine failure that brought them undone. Are they bolting on D5 Pirellis? Can't quite see the numbers from where I am, but if that's the case, then that's I should think a reasonably soft tyre for this situation.
Yeah, we're running a pretty soft tyre. I had to ease off at one stage and bring them back to life a bit, and they did. They came right back to life, and I was able to get back into 23s again.
Well, they've been there now for 35 seconds, plus what Mike mentioned before, which we think was about 10 seconds. Tony Longhurst, finger at the ready to fire the BM back to life.
Looks like they've
got a problem.
They've topped her up with Castrol and now can't get it fired.
They've got a problem.
Yep.
49 seconds. This is precious time. You cannot afford to lose 10 seconds in a race like this. Now, what is going on here, Gracie?
Well, they're trying to break the dry brake system. It's maybe they're thinking that they've pressurised the system and it's flooding the engine.
So they're trying to release the air build-up, the pressure in the thing.
Yeah.
So we should explain that one side is fuel intake and the other side is for vent, and normally you have a vent bottle attached.
Yes, it is. It makes our 19-second stop look pretty good.
Yeah, you're looking really flash. 1 minute 17. And remember, of course, that Jim had done such a splendid job to really climb back through the field with amazing speed. This is very, very dangerous, tipping fuel like this all over pit lane.
Yeah, it certainly is.
They were going so well because they had managed to catch and pass the Johnny Cicotto CBM BMW M3. Now a minute 38 passes in the pits. And still no sign of a vent bottle. I don't know whether I'm misinterpreting the situation here. That's a little bit of soapy water to try and dilute the fuel, which is obviously a smart, safe and sensible thing to do.
When there's petrol around like that, I'm quite happy to be up here on your commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. Safer to be in a red jacket on a day like today, I think.
I noticed Wynne is hanging on to one of the work Sierras out there. It'd be interesting to know what the times are, but he's
Well, we'll get those for you. Just before we do leave you, Gracie, I'm sure you've got a very kind word for those lads at the TAFE College that work so hard to get your car back in shape.
Yeah, me and many other crews here, they've done a superb job. It's not the fact that they just tack the cars together to give you some old rubbishy box to go out and race with. They put you back with a completely straight motor car, and then my guys have made it into a race car from that. The two teams have done a superb job with my car.
Yeah, they really do a great job. And Jim Richards, should I say Tony Longhurst, now rejoins the race. Thanks for your comments, Alan. Thanks for dropping by, and I hope all goes well for you this afternoon. And you don't have any fuel problems.
Or water problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Gracie.
Alan Grice with Neil Crompton in the pit area, and not the best of stops for Frank Gardner's JPS BMW team.
Disastrous stop, in fact, because they were not only in 4th place outright in the race, of course, they were leading their class, the BMWs being in the 1600 to 2500 cc class. But that's no longer the case. In fact, teammate Ludwig Finnar in the second JPS car will be leading the under 2.5 litre category from Gary Brabham in the 41 BMW and Johnny Cicotto in the 42 car. Klaus Ludwig, of course, leads the race. Steve Soper in 2nd place. They're the two Texaco cars. Then Alan Grice, Win Percy at the wheel in 3rd spot. Jim Richards, of course, Tony Longhurst will be out of that place now, and it'll be Glenn Seaton moving up into 5th place in the 1st of the Peter Jackson Nissans. Then George Fury, the 2nd Nissan car. John Crook and Peter McLeod in the dealer team Commodore in position number 7. Position 8, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio in the BMW. Position 9, Robbie Francevic, Ludwig Finnar now at the wheel of that car. And position 10, Johnny Cicotto and Gianfranco Brancatelli.
Hardie 1000 World Touring Car Championship race. Glenn Seaton, car number 15, presently running 4th on the racetrack. Coming up behind Tony Noski in the Kalari Transport Commodore. As we take BP race cam, you'll see one of the Sierras very quickly will bolt onto the tail of Glenn. There it is with the headlights ablaze. Klaus Ludwig is the race leader in the first of the Texaco cars, number 7, the 6th car. Running in 2nd spot, Win Percy, 3rd in the number 2 Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore, and Glenn Seaton in 15, and there goes the Texaco star beneath the bridge and heading up to Bridgestone Corner, the right-hander. John Bow at the wheel of the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. Got some great picks coming out of that. So both Nissans are running well. Another one parked off there on the left-hander as they go up.
You'll notice, Mike, that the Sierras are not quick round corners, and that the Nissan's quite able to stay with him over the top of the mountain there. It's only when they come down on the really fast pass that the Sierras begin to get away. This is to some degree because they're under-tired for the amount of power that they have.
Yes, I take your point, Neville. They really haven't got to worry about the cornering when you've got so much grunt in a straight line. In fact, John Bow's done a good job over the top of the mountain to stay in touch with the Sierra. They come down to Toledo Tools Turn. Fascinating race unravelling here at Mount Panorama today. The clouds are still rolling in and they're getting blacker.
Situation is this on lap 54, Mike. There are only 3 cars now on the leading lap. That's Klaus Ludwig in the number 7 Eggenberger Texaco car, then Pierre Dieudonné in the 2nd of the Texaco cars, and Win Percy in the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. 4th place, and only just a lap down, is Glenn Seaton in the number 15 Peter Jackson Nissan, followed by George Fury, car 30, Peter McLeod in the dealer team Mobile Commodore, car number 10. Then Brabham in 7th position, Gary Brabham, of course, that is in car 41, the BMW, followed by car 42, Johnny Cicotto in 8th place. 9th spot is held by Andrew Madecki in the Oxo Supercube Sierra, and 10th spot held also by BMW car 45, Ludwig Finnar, now at the wheel of that car.
Now, the leading car, to me, seems to have slowed a little bit from where he was, because we've got a decreasing gap between the Dodone car in second place, which is now much closer, who's got away a little bit from Win Percy, but those three now quite close together on the road.
Thank you, Neville. John Bower heads up Motorcraft Hill yet again towards BP Cutting. Andrew Madecki, of course, who led this race, is now handed over to Don Smith in the Oxo Super Cube Ford Sierra. He's in the pit studio at the moment with Neil Crompton.
Mike, when we went to our last commercial break on the Castrol scoreboard, it read like a nightmare for Andrew Madecki because all of a sudden his name wasn't in the top 10, and it had been up there, in fact, right at the top of it for so many laps leading around to the World Touring Car Championship. Andrew, there seems to have been some confusion. Gricey helped us out in explaining the situation, but it seems as though sitting in the pits was a chronically bad thing to do.
Yeah, I must say, it looks like I've made a mistake. I've done very little in long-distance racing. The only racing I've done is Group C sports cars with John Fitzpatrick. And in that, you know, you dive in when the pace car's out, and you can join on again at the tail, just like the way they do it in the States, and that's what I expected to be able to do, you know. I couldn't believe that everybody else wasn't doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, I think your car is back in position 11 at this stage. Do you think in any way, shape or form the situation is retrievable?
Well, we can only try. The speed that we were going was very, very comfortable for both me and the car. I think I can, well, I know I can go a bit harder. And as soon as we've got Don over with his statutory third of the race, you know, I'll be going like buggery.
You've knocked on the door of international competition a couple of times. You're the winner of the Malaysian Grand Prix. You finished 4th and 6th in rounds of the World Endurance Championship in Porsche 956 sports cars. Do you think that now this great performance today will open the eyes of some of the international teams, and you might be able to either take your team into this situation, or perhaps get a drive and really prove your international worth, because he's certainly showing it in terms of skill?
Well, I hope so, Neil. You know, I've been knocking on the door for a long time, and I don't know whether I don't do my PR right, or whether some people say I don't look like a racing driver.
What do they look like?
You know, it's so often. Yeah, I'd like to think something will happen.
We'll keep our fingers crossed, and we hope that everything goes well for you this afternoon, but certainly a bad situation. And incidentally, before I leave you, the Roland Ratzenberger BMW M3 that spent some time in the pits, that's car number 46, has been pushed to the rear, and so we can expect to see the Rat in another car later this afternoon. We'll have more news of that shortly.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil Compton. Yeah, that car, the 46 car, has been retired, but of course Ratzenberger is cross-ended, so we will probably see him back. There's the 41 car, that's Gary Brabham at the wheel, and in fact Gary Brabham leads the under 2.5 litre class with his co-driver Juan Manuel Fangio.
Well, the Beige and Bauquet Nissan having a good run up the inside of them as they head up to the right-hander at Bridgestone.
The placings in that under 2.5 litre class, all BMWs running 1, 2, 3. The 41 car, Brabham and Fangio running first in the class. Second in the class, car 42, Johnny Cicotto. And third in the class, car 45, Ludwig Finnar.
Brancatelli going through there. We're following the number 41 car. Gary Brabham at the wheel, sharing with Juan Manuel Fangio. Good to see Gary back home again and doing this race, of course.
And I don't think, in fact, that you'll find that Brancatelli is very far behind Brabham at the moment. It has both lost a couple of laps to the lead-up.
In the small car class, up to 1,600 cc's, Toyota's hold the day there at the moment. Cars 90, 91, 92, holding all positions. John Smith, John Faulkner, and the Ratcliffe Gibbs car, 1, 2, 3 in that category.
Let's update you on the Castrol scoreboard. Klaus Ludwig continues to lead. Pierre Dieudonné runs in second spot. The two Texaco cars, 1, 2. Win Percy is third in car number 2. Fourth is John Bower, presently in the number 15 car. Then Terry Shield in the number 30 car runs fifth for the Peter Jackson Nissan team. Sixth spot, John Crook at the wheel of the second of the Mobile Commodores. In seventh spot, 35, Don Smith. Andrew Madecki stepping out of the car. Eighth spot, Gary Brabham, who've just been following. Ninth, 42, Gianfranco Brancatelli down 1 lap. 10th spot, 45, Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finnar, they're down 2. Hardie 1000 coming to you live on the 7 Network across Australia and New Zealand. There's our third place driver, Win Percy, and the Chickadee Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. Win at the wheel, taking our race cam up towards the cutting at BP. And Win Percy, of course, joining Alan Grice. Had an absolutely horrendous wreck here on Friday. They've been able to get the car back thanks to the TAFE apprentices. And I tell you what, Alan Grice could not have a more capable driver at the wheel of his car today. Win Percy is a total professional.
43-year-old Win Percy nearly didn't get involved in motorsport. He broke his neck on the eve of his first race. In 1975, a fully recovered Win finished runner-up in the British Touring Car Championship, and he was bridesmaid again in 76. Percy joined Scotsman Tom Walkinshaw's team in 1980. Mazda was the choice, and the Weymouth-led Foot collected 3 British titles on the trot. By 85, Walkinshaw had installed Win in his Jaguars and Rovers as permanent co-driver. He should have won the European title last year for Rover by 1 digit, but FISA's maths men gave the crown to BMW's Roberto Ravaglia. Walkinshaw had his yellow and blue Commodore ready for 1987 and the World Championship, but alas, it was not to be seen on the track. Percy therefore concentrated on the odd Jaguar sports car outing and a stint in a Raz Sierra for the British Championship at Silverstone, which he duly won. So when you think of pros, Win's the go.
You betcha, Winnie Percy, and he's doing just fine out there for the Bob Jane T-Mart's team today. At the moment, another fella who's doing very, very well indeed is young Ludwig Finauer in the second of the JPS BMWs, sharing this car today with former Australian champion Robbie Francevic.
Yeah, and I think Ludwig would be pretty grateful to Francevic as well, who's been pretty much overlooked in the build-up to this race, obviously because of the number of overseas stars that we've got involved here. And the Sopa car is in the pits. Goodness me, Pierre Dieudonné, the Texaco car is there. There it is on screen. This car running second on the track, of course, behind teammate Klaus Ludwig at the moment. Will he hold that place? I would doubt it, because Win Percy wasn't that far astern of him. Keeping an eye out for Win Percy's position on the track.
36 cars now remain in the James Hardie 1000. 3 on the same lap.
48 started.
Almost certainly Percy's going to go through into second place as a result of that, which was a scheduled pit stop, of course. And a nice quick one. No problems. And Dieudonné, I think, stayed at the wheel.
Yes, he did.
Certainly did. And Percy is into second place. So it's Klaus Ludwig leading in the first Texaco car, followed by Win Percy in the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. And then Pierre Dieudonné in the car on screen, the black Texaco Sierra. Andrew Madecki just up ahead of him, although a lap down, of course. Don Smith at the wheel of that car. Retirees in the race, as Mike just mentioned, there are only 36 cars still up and running. The Maserati, it has disappeared. Armin Hahner and Kevin Bartlett. Car 5, of course, the Peter Brock entry, also off the track. Car 9 has retired. Alan Moffat, Andy Rouse in the ANZ Sierra. 11, of course, we saw poor old Larry Perkins in that first lap incident with car 18, driven by Neville Crichton, the Shell Ultra Sierra, put both of them out of business. And not long afterwards, we saw Dick Johnson park the 17 Shell Ultra car off the side of the track, retired. Car 21 has disappeared. That's Graham Crosby and John Billington, the New Zealanders, in their VK Commodore. Car 22 is also out. The Lusty brothers went out in spectacular fashion, as we saw. Car 32 missing in action. Warren Cullen, Gary Sprague, we saw that incident as well. Car 46 has retired. That's the Emmanuel Pirro, Roland Ratzenberger BMW. And car 57, Colin Bond and Lucio Cesario. We saw Lucio put them out of business also. So a lot of cars, a lot of damage. 36 survivors at this stage, but still so far to go. 100 laps plus remaining.
Well, we're watching Pierre Dieudonné coming down the hill, and no doubt about it that the engineer journalist is keeping his end up very well in this car. He's not very far behind the number 35 car, the Medica car, which led the race earlier on, but he hasn't got ahead of him, which I think is quite significant, because we had been led to understand that in Don Smith's hand, that car might not be quite as quick. Well, Pierre still hasn't got ahead of him.
Pierre Dieudonné, fastest lap on the track, is held not by this car but by the other Texaco car. Klaus Niedwitz, just before he came in and handed over to Klaus Ludwig, posted fastest time in the race so far of 2 minutes 22:08.
I think Richard told us earlier on they were a bit worried about the clutch on the other car, and that's one of the reasons why he took it very easily at the start.
They're worried about the clutch on all of the Sierras, and as far as starts are concerned, that's why Niedwitz was so slow off the line. He said before the race even started, when I was talking to him, he said, "I will be very slow off the line. Steve will go quickly, and we'll protect the rear of the car to start with." And that was the plan from the beginning.
Well, the man who's running second in the great race for 1987 is, of course, Win Percy, carrying out Bob Jane T-Mart's race cam. Well, Win, I reckon on Friday you had no idea that you'd be running second today.
No, I think the guys at the technical college did an unbelievable job of the car. I mean, it really was very extensively damaged. And here we are in a competitive car. Fantastic.
How competitive is the car compared to the hot laps you had on Friday?
Well, if anything, I think it's settled down. I'm not used to the power steering that Alan has on this car, and I must admit it took me a couple of days to really feel it home. And then when I thought I was at home, of course, I went and stuffed it, which was fantastic.
Coming down at the bottom into the main straight again, and of course the pace car being out, a lot of drivers fell into a trap there when they weren't quite sure, I don't think, of how the regulations applied.
No, I think you're right. I was waiting to complete at least one lap after the pace car had put its lights out, which is customary. But suddenly the green flags appeared at the top of the hill, and I'm afraid I was told to go for it.
Well, as Gracie says, green means go.
He's bloody right.
Okay, we'll let you go. Thanks, Win, for the brief chat. We'll come back to you later.
Thank you.
Win Percy, a gentleman. Meanwhile, the second Brock Commodore.
The only surviving car, and Brock, is it? Yes, Peter Brock getting into the car. Let's go down to the pits. There's the action as they strap Brock in. Of course, the 05 Commodore out of action, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. We've seen this before, haven't we?
We certainly have. I remember Phil Brock standing in the pits waiting to take over his ride in the second car. Then brother had to step in and say, "Park it, I'm going racing."
Brock says, "I'm ready."
And he's off, Peter Brock. So the 8 times James Hardie winner rejoins the field.
He was in 6th place when he went into the pits, and I don't think he'd have lost that much ground there.
We'll have that for you shortly. That's good to see. Brocky is back out on the racetrack, and he will leave in 10th place. Let's recap the positions for you on the Castrol scoreboard. Klaus Ludwig leads. Win Percy and Gracie run in second. Pierre Dieudonné is third. 4th place is John Bow. 5th spot is, of course, next one up, because the Crook McLeod car goes back. That'll be Georgie Fury and Terry Shield. They're then followed by Don Smith at the wheel of the Oxo Supercube car. Then Johnny Cicotto and Franco Brancatelli. Next on the queue, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio. And rounding out the 9 is Francevic and Finnar. Still to be answered in this year's James Hardie World Touring Car Championship edition from Mount Panorama. There's the Netcom car, Dennis Hawley, Murray Carter. And Neil Crompton, we have some interesting stats to come from this car today.
You're right. Yes, indeed we do, Mike. And this information that we now see on screen is a combination of technologies provided by Netcom and our own racecam people, and we're getting live data out of this motor car. And what we see in the display on the left-hand side of frame is the speed of the motor car, and the right there we have the revolutions per minute. Quite excitingly, down on the bottom left of screen we have tyre temperature, and that's done on an optic fibre basis. There's a sensor up in the mudguard in each corner of the car, and you can see the tyre temperature readout. What we see in the middle of the screen down the bottom is an accelerometer, and then across to the right is the turbo wastegate temperature of 817 degrees Celsius and turbo boost pressure of 1.2 atmospheres, and across to the top right is the gear that the car is currently in. Now, there is a very small lag factor in this data, but it really is quite fascinating. And this is a world first, bringing information out of a race car, putting it on screen as it happens. And at the moment we have Steve Masterton at the wheel, who makes a return to Group A racing this weekend. It's quite interesting stuff, I'm sure you'll agree.
Certainly is. Yes, I did call Dennis Hawley. In fact, it is Steve Masterton, sharing with veteran Murray Carter, and Murray's been here since the first days in Ford Custom lines. He's driven just about everything at Mount Panorama and thoroughly enjoying his race this year in the turbo Nissan.
I wonder how long it'll be before something like that system, perfected by Netcom, one of Australia's leading data communications companies, becomes standard equipment, where team managers can sit in the pits and monitor all of that kind of information.
Well, Dennis Hawley, who is in fact here, was telling me yesterday that he believes that it cuts testing time in half. The amount of information that you can get out of a car, you can find out purely within a couple of laps whether or not the car is working, and if it's not, where things are going wrong. The other interesting thing is with being able to tell the tyre temperatures, they can tell whether or not they're likely to get a blowout. And they cited the example of Nigel Mansell at Adelaide last year. They maintain that this system would have allowed Nigel Mansell, or the team anyway, to know that that tyre was going to blow and that it was overheating a good 2 laps before it did.
Well, the action is hot on Mount Panorama on the circuit itself, but let me just tell you that weather-wise here, it's getting very, very bleak. The breeze is stiffening even further. It's getting very, very cold, very, very overcast. The clouds look ominous.
The Netcom Nissan is interesting in that the Nissans are only pulling 240 k's down the straight, whereas the Sierra Cosworths are pulling somewhere in the region of 275.
Hey, I got a radar speed readout here. Klaus Ludwig just recently, last lap or so, was clocked at 273 kilometres per hour down the straight. Soper, previously when he was at 267 kilometres per hour. The Oxo car, 257. Alan Grice in the Commodore, 252.
That's interesting, insofar as Soper is 6k slower than Ludwig, and I would have expected that car to be almost exactly the same performance, so it's interesting from that point of view. The other thing with the Soper Dieudonné car is that it's pitting some 5 to 6 laps earlier than the team are expecting it. They expect the cars to be able to do 35, 36, 37 laps between stops, and the car has only managed stints of around about 30 laps. So that all is not quite as well as it seems with that car at the moment, I think.
Here's another man who'd like to know a bit about tyre temperatures, Wyn Percy. He had a tyre go, having run over some debris, at about 230 miles an hour on the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans earlier on this year, and walked away.
Recapping the current positions on our Castrol scoreboard. Race leader is Klaus Ludwig in the Eggenberger car. Second, Wyn Percy in the Commodore. Third is Pierre Dieudonné in the second of the Texacos. Fourth spot held down by John Bowe in the Peter Jackson Nissan. Fifth spot by Terry Shield in the second of the team cars. Sixth spot is Big Donnie Smith in Andrew Medecki's Oxo Supercube car. Seventh spot, Gianfranco Brancatelli in the BMW. He's down 2. Eighth spot, 41, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio down 2. Ninth is, of course, now Peter Brock, down 2 laps in ninth. And rounding out the 10 is Ludwig Finauer and Robbie Francevic.
Distance on screen at the moment. Car number 90, the Toyota Corolla, which leads the 1600cc class. John Smith and Drew Price are the drivers for this car. And Smithy, of course, no stranger to Mount Panorama, no stranger to class victories here. He's been the flag bearer for Toyota in this category. And not only at Mount Panorama, but in the Touring Car Championship around Australia for several seasons now, doing a great job. Placings in the category, in fact, Smithy leads it from teammate John Faulkner in car 91, and third place held by car 94, Bagnall and Jennings.
Yeah, both these cars, both the first and second car, in fact, have got a lot more power than the third place car because they're running to slightly different specification. The Japanese specification, they have about another 20 brake horsepower, which rather miffed Chris Hodgetts, the British touring car champion, who sorted car 94 out but hasn't actually driven it.
Coming down under the Bridgestone Bridge. I think Drew Price, in fact, is at the wheel at the moment. John Smith started the race. Drew Price, of course, with a long and successful history in kart racing.
The little Toyotas are having things a little bit easier for themselves than they normally do underneath the Australian Group A regulations. They tend to run in the up to 2 litre category. That's the Class C, the bottom category, and they're normally competing against the Nissan Gazelle, which gives them some fairly stiff competition because, of course, it's got more power. But running underneath the World Touring Car Championship regulations, it has to be a 1600cc class, and in fact the only competition they do have is the Alfa Romeo 33 of Giorgio Francia and Daniel Toffoli.
You mentioned the Nissan Gazelle. That car, of course, with Mark Scaife driving it, didn't get around lap 1. They had some problem with it. It did go back out again and begin circulating, but I'm not exactly sure where they're placed in the field at the moment. Well down.
When we were down in the pits earlier on, in fact, the team was saying that the car had come in with overheating problems, which we couldn't quite work out why he would have stopped the car on the circuit rather than continue driving it slowly and keep the air running through it. Because, of course, if you stop a car that's overheating, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter because there's no air going through it to cool it down.
Car number 3 is in the pits at the moment. That, of course, is the Peter Jansen, Peter Fitzgerald Commodore VL. I'm not sure whether they had a driver change there or not. I don't see any driver having got out of the car. No,
doesn't look that way.
Position 17 on the racetrack at the moment, car number 3. And the captain, Peter Jansen, making a long-awaited return to Mount Panorama. It's been a season or 2 since he's been here. Peter Fitzgerald, of course, the reigning Australian Group E champion.
It's interesting how technology has evolved, and 16 valve cars, 4-cylinder 16 valve cars now lead all of the classes. The Toyota is a 16 valve 1600, the BMW is a 2.3 litre 16 valve unit, and the Ford Sierra Cosworth, that too is a 1600 with a turbo on it.
Well, a lot of cars are going this way primarily because the regulations in regard to fuel emissions are indicative of the fact that you've got to have a better breathing engine, and 16 valves the answer to this, and that's why you'll find a majority of major manufacturers, led by the Japanese and the Germans, are doing just this.
Win Percy at Chrysler, of course, proving that it's not necessary to have 16 valves. Brute power and cubic inches will do the job.
Okay, the number 35, Don Smith, Andrew Madecki. Let's go to our Motorcraft pit report.
Yes, and Don Smith's getting out. The original plan for the Oxo team was that Don do another stint, but he's climbed out. He and number 1 driver Andrew Madecki are having a bit of a chat. Meanwhile, the crew is replacing 4 tyres. It's a very casual stop. I'll just see if I can grab Don. Don, any problems?
Yeah, just the battery. The alternator's failed and let the battery go flat.
Okay, you were going pretty well up into 6th spot. No other problems, I gather?
No, everything else is working good. Just missing all the time, you know. It's breaking down with the electronics. Mechanicals are beautiful. It's just the electronics are playing up because the battery's dead.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew Madecki did indicate, in fact, when they came in for the previous change and Don Smith got in the car, that he was concerned about that problem, and it has come to pass. And so, oh, hello, look at that, Peter Brock with the number 10 car going flat out as Klaus Ludwig continues to lead the race in the Eggenberger Texaco car. Alan Grice, Win Percy at the wheel of their car in 2nd place, then Pierre Dudonné in the 2nd Texaco entry. Glenn Seaton in car 15 is in 4th spot, then George Fury, his Nissan teammate, holds down 5th.
6th spot held by John Franco, Brancatelli and Cicotto, 1 lap down. 7th spot now in the pits, Madecki and Smith in the Oxo entry. 8th, Brabham and Manuel Fangio down 1. 9th spot held by Peter Brock. and he's down 2. 10th spot, 45, Francevic and Finau.
11th spot on the track at the moment, Jim Richards. Tony Longhurst, in fact, 2 laps down in the 44 car. 12th spot is John Giddings in his car, 2 laps down the second Oxo car. Murray Carter, Steve Marston in the wheel, 3 laps down in position 13. Then Gary Scott, position 14, 3 laps down. So is Graham Cameron in car 15, the Commodore.
16th spot, Brian Callahan and Barry Graham. They're down 3. 17th, Moore and Michelle Delcourt down 3. Then 18th is 38 Bill O'Brien and Brian Sampson. 19th is Peter Jansen and Peter Fitzgerald in the number 3 car. They're down 4. 20th spot, Cabbage and Bailey in another Commodore.
21, Kaninowski, Gary Rush in a Commodore, 4 laps down, as are Steve Reed and Trevor Ashby in 22nd position. Tony Mulvihill, Ken Matthews, 23rd position, also 4 laps down. Then the Trevor Coe Ian Tulloch, BMW, in position 24. Ray Gulson, Graham Gulson, father and son, are 5 laps down, position 25.
26th is Phil Ward and Lyndon Riefmuller in the Mercedes. 27th, John Faulkner and Drew Price. Quite a Toyota benefit. Behind them, John Smith and Faulkner. 29th is Andrew Bagnall and Mark Jennings. And 30th spot, Winnie Vaught and Olivier Gruard.
Position 31, Marcus Ostrike, Roland Ratzenberger, car 40. Position 32, David Ratcliffe and Mark Gibbs, 8 laps down in their Toyota. Giorgio Francia at the wheel of car number 10 in 33rd spot. Mark Scaife and Grant Jarrett still out there in the 60 car in 34th position, 13 laps down. And Kent Bajan, Graham Bowkett in position 35 after 70 laps in the great race of 1987.
61, the James Hardie World Touring Car Championship race from Mount Panorama at Bathurst. And the man who was in a class of his own on the mountain this year is Herr Ludwig, driving the number 7 Eggenberger Prepare Texaco Ford, leading this race very, very comfortably. He heads through the top corner and he's driving perhaps the car that everyone wants to race, not only in 87 but potentially in 1988, the Ford Sierra.
At the mention of its name, the opposition starts to frown. The Ford Sierra is a complete racing touring car. Built from the ground up with one purpose in mind, the limited edition RS version is spectacular in its performance. Through the 2-litre 4-cylinder 16-valve twin-cam turbo engine, this beast can produce anywhere from 420 to 480 horsepower depending on boost pressure. That's incredible output from such a tiny package, and the tyres and brakes seem to cope. Even weight is on the side of the Sierra. The class minimum is 1,035 and the cars weigh in at just under 1,100. Whether the rest of the car can handle the pace is what we'll find out later this afternoon.
And they're certainly doing quite well at the moment with Klaus Ludwig, the man who stole pole position for this race yesterday with an absolute blistering 2:16 plus, and of course elected not to run the first part of this race. Stepped in on the first pit stop. He's out in front and doing it very comfortably indeed. Well, the World Touring Car Championship has certainly brought any number of overseas journalists and media men to Australia to cover Australia's unique touring car event. One of the best is in the pit studio with Neil Crompton.
Well, you really know how to crawl, don't you, Mike Raymond? Joining me is Joe Saywood, who, as you said, is one of the foremost international motorsport riders and follows the World Touring Car Championship. Welcome to Bathurst once again.
Thank you.
And it really is an interesting and great race again this year. Before we have a chat to you about your impressions of the race, just going back to the Don Smith and Andrew Medicki stop, your interpretation at this stage would be that Don hasn't been in the car long enough to do the mandatory third, and therefore another tactical error from the Oxo team, and they'll have to come back in and let Don do some more laps.
Yes, I think he'll have to go in later on. But they were really set back by that pace car incident, and it's very unfortunate that the track is so long. It's 6.2 kilometres long. And on the long tracks in Europe, we have more than one pace car. We have sometimes 2 and maybe even 3 if it's a long enough track, which means that the cars that are trapped in the pit lane do not lose a whole lap, because that's also affected Johnny Cicotto, because he was right up there at the front.
Okay, so your interpretation of how things are panning out at the moment?
Well, I mean, it was a fantastic first hour and a half, and now, unfortunately, the pace car's rather broken up the action. But, well, it's still close. I think it's 18 seconds or 20 seconds between the leaders. And that's nothing. They've got to come in for a stop. That's 45 seconds with speeding up, slowing down time. So it's by no means over yet.
I'm really getting the impression, Joe, that I can feel a BMW coming on. Do you sense that they're going to be very well positioned at the end of the day?
Yes, I think they've had all kinds of trouble in practice. It's just been a disaster for them. But I've been saying all week that I think they're going to be there at the end, and I'm not going to change my mind now. I'm also quite surprised with the Nissans. They were in all kinds of problem in practice, but they're chugging along there too, and they're...
Well, I think that Freddie Gibson did the right thing with his cars. He decided to really opt for a conservative package very early in the week. He knew on Wednesday that they are out of the ball game in terms of time.
Well, it's all about survival in a 6-hour race. Sheer speed isn't going to get you there necessarily, so if you just keep on plugging away, you can even survive a setback or two.
Can the Egenberger cars last for 6.5 hours?
I think you better ask me in a few hours' time.
All right, thanks for dropping in. Look forward to chatting to you later on. Joe Savory.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Neil Crompton. We've been following car number 16th. This, of course, is the Gary Scott, John French, Akihiko Nakaya Dulux Auto Colour Mitsubishi. And that's a mouthful, let me tell you. The car started, in fact, from 23rd position earlier this morning and presently running 13th on the track, so it's a fine performance. And they've very strongly supported the racing program, Dulux Auto Colour. Car looks fantastic and it's running very sweetly here today.
Yes, indeed it is. In Europe, in fact, the cars haven't run this year so much. They ran in one race, which was the British Grand Prix Support Sprint race, and it was the nearest thing to a Sierra Cosworth there was. The Stirine had been the car to have. People looked on it as the car to have until the Sierra came along. And it's very interesting that the car is nowhere near as quick this year at the mountain as it was last year.
So much for the Mitsubishi. We've got second placed Win Percy pulling into the pits at this very moment for a quick pit stop. Percy will obviously stay in the car.
Interestingly enough, Mike, they haven't bothered to open the bonnet, look at the water or anything like that yet.
Win Percy stays in the car. Cool drink. I'd say he's fired it and is off.
That was a pretty quick stop.
It certainly was.
It was a very quick stop, and it just goes to bear out what we've said about Win taking care of a car. There was no tyre problems or anything like that, and he was back out in that race very quickly indeed. Well, now, almost certainly it's going to see him probably drop one place as a result of it, but now the pit stop situation is going to get interesting because we can't be too far off the leader having to stop, I would have thought, very shortly. Here's Win back in the groove again very quickly. The change in the handling between a car that's full of fuel and a car that's empty of fuel is something that he will adjust to, and adjust to quite quickly with the sort of experience that he's got. But it does make a difference. Makes a difference under braking, and also, of course, if he's going to tap a curb or anything like that, it won't be quite so light, except that, of course, if he does take charge at the back, it's a bit more difficult.
That's dropped him back to third spot on the road at the moment. And looming up behind is, of course, the Nissan Skyline at the present moment. Running in fourth spot is, of course, car number 15, John Bow. And getting very close indeed to the tail here of Win Percy as they sweep across past the Castrol Sand Trap and drop now down towards the S's.
They would have been the big disappointment of the race, I think, well, certainly up until it started anyway. They had a dreadful qualifying session. They just blew one turbo after another, and all the promise that they've shown all year was just in one foul swoop. The Europeans said, well, what's with these Nissans? You know, they don't seem to be doing anything. And they are, in fact, very slow down the straight by comparison with the Sierra Cosworth. The problem with the cars, of course, being the lack of aerodynamic aids, and therefore they're a bit difficult to handle, and they don't seem to go down the straight quite the way that they should. In the pits at the moment is the Ashby Commodore, and that's the Lansvale Smash Repairs car number 39, Steve Reed and Trevor Ashby.
Brake pad change on that car. Gloves very necessary.
Now that's an interesting thing, because I was talking to the man from AP Brakes before the race started and said, now what about brake pads? What's going to happen with them? Because of course they take extra time to change when a pit stop comes along. He was telling me that the Nissans had been practicing them yesterday, and they had managed to change all the brake pads, or the front brake pads, in 35 seconds.
That's incredible.
Well, Win Percy really does have his hands full now, because I'd expected to have seen him got away a little bit, but he hasn't. And I think he's going to have to struggle quite hard to hold on to that third place while he's got a full load of fuel.
As I said earlier, I don't think Alan Grice could have picked a more talented co-driver.
He might have questioned that on Friday. He might have questioned that on Friday.
Yes, I don't think all Gricey did was really just shrug the shoulders and say, well, there's not much you can do about it.
Well, let's face it, he did exactly the same thing, poor old win, as Alan Moffat did last year with Peter Brock's car. So, you know, it happens to the very best, and of course, Win Percy is one of those.
Grice has been a few himself too, hasn't he?
Yes, he's had the 1 or 2 offs, but he's a hard charger, and Win's times are almost identical to Brock's, and that has to be great, particularly if you're going to try and force the pace up the front. Andrew Madecki doesn't enjoy that luxury. Donnie Smith, who owns the Oxo Supercube team, Don's the first to admit he can't stay to the times set by Andrew Madecki, so every time he jumps into the car, the times fall away just a little. And that's a problem that, of course, Hardie drivers have faced over the years when they had their once-a-year race. It's changed this year just a little.
I must say, though, Mike, it has all the ingredients of tremendous drama as this race builds up, with the Singleton car there, the Singleton Commodore, defending, if you like, Australia against the European onslaught.
Once again, we follow Win Percy, car number 2, on lap 75, running third. Down 1 lap, and behind him is, of course, Glenn Seaton in car number 15, and in 5th spot, Glenn's teammate George Fury in the second of the Peter Jackson Nissan Skylines. Actually closed right up behind Win there for a while. Now Win's off and running again, building up that advantage. It's opened up considerably in the last, 2 laps. It's quite incredible. Yes. Car number 30.
Why, into the pits.
That's 30 coming in now.
And it came in quite slowly, Michael. I don't think it came in quite as quickly as perhaps we'd normally have expected, but I think he just cut his engine and drifted in.
Terry Shield handing over to George Fury. Terry, of course, came up with a win. Let's pass down now to Neil Crompton, who's Johnny on the spot.
Okay, we've got 20 seconds down in this stop so far, Mike, and all's going to plan. George Fury strapping in. Terry Shield standing by. Everything's good. They got belts that work. The guys are just getting the remainder of the fuel out of the vent bottle and just tucking it back into the car. Andrew Bartley's on the front right-hand corner here in front of me. He's doing a pad change on the Nissan, and I haven't seen them do that before. He's been around in plenty of professional race teams. He knows what he's doing. And across on the other side, on the left-hand side, they're also doing the same. The pads that have come out of the car don't look too bad, in fact. And he's still working away on this side of the car. They've been in now for 56 seconds, so this isn't as quick as they'd have liked. George just has to sit and pad for time. Now the car's off the jacks. 1 minute and 10 seconds down, 1 minute 11 as the car departs the pit area. And so that's not too bad for 120 litres of gas, 4 tyres and 2 brake pads.
So George Fury in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. They came with 2 cars for the 87 race. They still have 2 of them running very competitively in the event. Glenn Seaton a couple of spots up now on George Fury. Let's check out the Castrol scoreboard on lap number 75. Klaus Ludwig is the race leader in the Texaco Ford Sierra from teammate Pierre Dieudonné. 3rd spot is Win Percy in the Alan Grice Bob Jane Commodore. 4th held down by Glenn Seaton and John Bow. 5th, George Fury and Terry Shield before that pit stop. 6th spot, Johnny Cicotto and Gianfranco Brancatelli. They're down 2. Following them, of course, is Peter Brock in the Mobile Commodore, number 10. Then 8th spot, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio. 9th spot, Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finau. And rounding out the 10, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the 2nd Oxo Supercube Sierra.
Welcome back to Mount Panorama, where the great race continues. Car 45 on screen, the JPS BMW car, driven by Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finauer, just returning to the track after a very quick pit stop. And I think it's time now to update the great... And that's our third hour Toyota update on the James Hardie 1000. There is just so much action, and in the pits, well, it's not total confusion. It looks like it, and it sounds like it. But most of those boys down there have got their act pretty well polished, and they're doing a damn good job to keep some of these cars up and running, Richard Hay.
Car 45, in fact, that we're looking at the moment with, I think, Ludwig Finauer at the wheel at the moment, was in the pits a short while ago because he damaged the rear of the car. Somebody had tapped the rear of the car and had tapped the bodywork onto the rim, and they had to bring the car in to replace the wheel and also knock the bodywork off the rim. So that was why that car was in the pits, and that car came in, of course, earlier than scheduled.
There was a puff of blue smoke from the rear there, and that wheel is rubbing on the body, which isn't going to improve anybody's health and temper.
That's the number 15 Nissan there. In the pits at the moment, Glenn Seaton and John Bow. And Neil Crompton down in the pits to give us a motorcraft update.
Yes, thank you indeed, Richard. John Bow out of the car, twice Australian Formula 1 champion. Glenn Seaton gets in. He did a great job this morning. Really fantastic driving in a car that's not particularly well suited to the mountain. Have a look at the front right-hand corner of the car. It's got some damage on it. They've had to really fight and barge their way through this traffic, and there's been plenty of it. See Andrew Bartley here changing brake pads on the Nissan. So they're punishing these cars. I've never seen them change pads before. Seaton in and steadied. I think they've got all their fuel in. They're just venting away the rest of the gas. And my old mate John Bow's just climbed out. He looks nice and second-hand. He's getting his helmet off at the moment. I'll have a chat to him in just a tick. Glenn's been in now for 1 minute and 4 seconds, so it's almost an identical stop to that of George's. And he's out in a time of 1 minute and 10 seconds. And notice that Glenn's pumping the brakes, trying to get some heat in those pads as quickly as he can. Mate, you look nice and second-hand.
Yeah, it's really hard work, but it's going quite well, really, considering it's a bit down on power, so I'm quite happy with it.
I've spoken to you after a couple of other stints in the car earlier in the year, and you've said, by gee, it's been hot and hard and I need to get fitter. Well, are you?
I'm fit now, yeah, but it's still it's a very difficult car to drive over the top of the mountain, as you can see probably from the in-car shots.
We were getting some great stuff on the BP race cam. You looked to be very busy, and there seemed to be maybe a tendency of a bit of understeer occasionally.
No, as the tyres went off, I understeered going into the corner and oversteered coming out, so...
Each way bet.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can't complain about that, can you?
Well, this is, I think, the first time that you've really been able to generate any decent laps in a car at Mount Panorama. Are you enjoying the circuit?
Oh, yeah, it's good. I like the new bit. I reckon it's much better than it was before. It's quite interesting with that very fast right-hand kink, and it, you know, it sort of sorts the men from the boys a bit.
OK, John, I'll let you go and have a drink. Thanks for talking to us, and we'll see you later on. John Bow.
Thank you very much, Neil Crompton, and to John Bow after a tough stint in the 15 Nissan, and Glenn Seaton now back in that car as the race passes the halfway distance.
Yes, indeed, and many people thought that the Texaco Sierra Cosworths wouldn't still be running at this stage. They are, and so are some other turbo cars too. Those Nissan Skylines lurking there in 4th and 5th places, and they could well be cars to keep an eye out for.
81 laps down, if my count is correct. 79 laps down, rather, just on the race halfway distance, and Ludwig continues to lead it in the Texaco Sierra. Soper, the second Sierra, Dudone at the wheel in second place. Win Percy at the wheel of Alan Grice's Bob Jane T-Mark's Commodore holding third. Then Glenn Seaton, we've just seen, back behind the wheel in 4th spot in the number 15 car. Johnny Cicotto in the BMW. Brancatelli, I should say, at the wheel in 5th spot. Then Peter Brock at the wheel of the number 10 Commodore holding down 6th. Position number 7, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart, 2 laps down in their Ford. Position number 8, Gary Brabham, Juan Manuel Fangio, it's a mouthful, 2 laps down as well. Position number 9 is George Fury and Terry Shield in the second of the Nissans. And position number 10, Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst, 2 laps down after 79 in the great race. Of 161 in the James Hardie 1000 for 1987 on screen. One of the European BMW entries, car 40. And of course, Roland Ratzenberger has done a quick switch, and he'll be involved in the driving of this car. He's not in it at the moment. He was in car 46 originally at the start of the race, but that car has been retired, and Roland is with Neil Crompton in the pits.
Wilco, I think Roland's about the only guy down here at the moment who's warm. It's become very, very cold at Mount Panorama, and he's very neatly dressed in his BMW M team outfit. But Roland, you've had a pretty ordinary sort of a morning. You made a number of pit stops and you had to retire car 46. What was the problem?
Yeah, I think something with the valves or the camshaft broke, and so we tried to carry on. I did a few laps in the car, but the engine didn't rev just up to 8 and not under 7,000. So we just decided to call it a day, and this was car number 46.
Sure. Now, you're cross-ended in a number of other cars. Will you go back out to the circuit this afternoon? Sorry? I know that you're cross-ended in some other cars. Will you go back out on the circuit in another car this afternoon?
I don't know yet what's going to be the decision, but obviously it's very important that Roberto gets some points. And for me, it would be quite important to get some World Championship points as well, but I think it's a bit too early at this stage to say something.
You're one of the busiest young men in international motorsport. You've been doing the European Formula 3 Championship and contesting the World Touring Car Championship. What do you have in store for us next year?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same than this year. Just hope it's a bit more successful.
Thanks very much for talking to us, and best of luck if you go back out. Thanks, Roland.
Roland Ratzenberger talking there with Neil Crompton, and car 40, which we were following during that interview, is in 30th position on the track. So they'll have to pick up a few more spots to pick up the points that Roland was so concerned about. Meantime, while that was happening on our Toyota replay, let's have a look at the Phil Ward Mercedes 190. He's had an adventuresome couple of days up here, Phil. Lyndon Reithmuller, his co-driver.
And that's the self-same wheel that he had a problem with yesterday and lost yesterday. No, it isn't.
No, it's the opposite side.
It's the opposite side.
Yeah, opposite side.
The opposite side.
Fell off yesterday in the final timed session, or untimed session yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, he ran back and picked that one up. He hasn't got to go and pick this one up. At least it stayed on the car. I think that is Revelio driving car number 40 now. And no doubt somebody will jump up and down and say it's not, but I think it is. And this is the man, of course, who won that disputed International Touring Car Championship last year from Win Percy.
The Merc 190, by the way, is in 25th position, so the car doing a lot better than most people expected, seeing as how it came here far outgunned.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere else now, though.
No, that's right.
No way.
BMW, their week has gone from bad to worse, with cars dropping out and being retired and so on. It's almost unreal. These little M3s, which have virtually conquered Europe, have had such a dreadful time while they're here. I think there's only 2 cars survived without any damage from practice.
Well, there's an old saying here, Richard, you can't help bad luck. And they've had plenty of that.
In abundance.
Car 92, just in behind the BMW, is the Ratcliffe and Gibbs Toyota Corolla entry, which is running 4th in that class, the 1600cc class. And the Eggenberger Texaco team are getting ready for a pit stop. They're all action down there, so we can expect to see one of the black and red Texaco cars into the pit lane shortly. That's the second Oxo Supercube car, 34. Just in behind the BMW. Car 34, of course, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart driving that entry. Andrew Madecki and Don Smith driving the lead Oxo car.
Talking of BMWs, of course, one has crept back up to 4th place.
Yep, look at this.
That's the number 7 car. That's the leader.
He's in trouble. Limping down towards the pit area. One of the Nissans going straight past. Coming down to Caltex Chase, I should say.
It's a long way yet to get to the pit lane. Klaus Ludwig behind the wheel, the man who set fastest time. His co-driver, Klaus Niedwitz, started the race. Handed over to Ludwig. They were flying up front, had a commanding lead in the race, but have got some problem and are making their way very slowly back to the pits.
Well, one man who will be smiling about that is the man we were looking at a few moments ago, Roberto Revelia.
There goes Steve Soper. That puts him in the lead for the race now.
Yeah, the Soper car in the lead, and of course the man who will be very happy about this is Alan Grice, who's sitting down there in the pit thinking to himself, well,
everything comes to who you waits.
You got it.
Here comes Klaus Ludwig into the pit area. The Eggenberger crew are ready and are waiting for the arrival of the car. Try to get in as quickly as possible. Actually, that's the quickest he's been. Here he comes. Coming up to...
Driver change coming up here too. Klaus Niedzwitz going to get into the car. On the opposite side to our camera, of course, left-hand drive. Our Motorcraft pit report speaks for itself, as you can see, the frenzied action on behalf of the Eggenberger team. Now, there seems to be there's obviously no mechanical problem. Then why was he taking it so slowly down Conrad's
fuel? My guess is fuel, but it's only a guess.
Well, if that's the case, he's chewing it up. Yep.
Yeah, it looks as if it was a fuel problem.
Fuel and a driver change, so yeah, it must have been fuel. Now, that drops them back to 3rd place.
And at the same time moves Win Percy up to 2nd. Be thankful it's a downhill run to the pit area here at Mount Panorama. As well, the pits aren't on top of the hill.
Well, let's watch and see whether it gets up to race speed fairly quickly, and if it does, then we'll know all is well, and if it doesn't, then we'll know that things aren't what they might be.
So, Steve Soper now leads the James Hardie 1000. And for a report on the pit stop you've just seen, let's go to the pits now with Neil Crompton.
Yes, Mike, Klaus Ludwig came to the pits because he ran out of fuel. An old and basic and simple problem in motorsport, and no matter how many millions of dollars you've got invested, you can still make those kind of mistakes. Just here and very busy, we were going to have a chat to him with Steve Soper. I believe he's now inherited the lead, or at least Pierre Dieudonné has, and they'll be making their pit stop very shortly. So we'll be right on the spot, and we'll call all the action as they come in.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, Steve was getting his coat off there in the background, so that can't be long before it happens. And looking at the number 7 car, all now seems to be well.
Everything's certainly falling into place for Rudy Eggenberger's team here today at Mount Panorama. Let's check the placings on the scoreboard, courtesy of Castrol. Pierre Dieudonné, race leader. 2nd spot now held by Klaus Niedzwitz. 3rd, still Win Percy and the Alan Grice Commodore. 4th, Johnny Cicotto and Brancatelli in the BMW. 5th, of course, is Peter Brock, John Crook and Peter McLeod. 6th spot, Glenn Seaton and John Bow on the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline, and right behind them, teammates Fury and Shield. 8th spot is Gary Bradman and Juan Manuel Fangio. They're down 2 laps. 9th spot, 44, Richardson Longhurst in the JBS BMW. Rounding up the 10:34, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the 2nd Oxo Supercube Sierra.
Klaus Ludwig from the throngs of people that have been hanging about. This man is the joint leader of the World Touring Car Championship, but plans just came unstuck a little bit for you then, Klaus, when you ran out of fuel with only half a lap to go before you stop.
Yeah, that's correct. We have an electronic decal which shows us exactly what we used, and that was definitely wrong. And I had 12 litres on the decal, and it was running out of.
You must be thrilled with the performance of the car. It's all looking very smooth. It's handling well. It's obviously going quick enough. Can you now maintain the pace right through until later this afternoon?
Hopefully. The car is doing so fine and no problem. Let's keep fingers crossed.
Your hopes for the World Championship with, well, let me see, 3 rounds to go. Do you think you can do the job?
Hopefully. You know, it's a super thing to win this World Championship. It's the first time this year. To be the first champion would be nice.
I know that you've had some problems with these cars in the last couple of rounds of the World Touring Car Championship with transmission, differential axles, those sorts of things. Do you believe that you've now engineered those problems out of the car?
Yes, I hope so. Rudy Eggenberger did a superb job, so I hope everything will stand together. You know, we won the 24 hours at the Nürburgring, which is extremely rough to the car also. So why shouldn't we win here? The car is running well, so hopefully.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking to us. Klaus Ludwig, the man who led this race until just a few moments ago, but is still in 2nd place.
And still looking menacing, may I say. Neil Crompton there with Klaus Ludwig, pole sitter for today's grade race. Car number 15, Glenn Seaton in 6th place at the moment, Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline. Of course, Glenn Seaton, runner-up in the Australian Touring Car Championship, is one of the young lions on the move. Keep an eye on him in the later stages today.
A new face in Toyota's gallery of champions is the whiz kid of touring car racing in Australia, 22-year-old Glenn Seaton. Racing since he was only 14 in karts, Glenn has made it to the top very early in his career. Since turning to car racing at 17, he's done well in the Australian Touring Car Championship and picked up a Castrol 500 win last year. When Glenn first arrived on the scene with the Peter Jackson team, there were those who wrote off the kid. Certainly in the case of the Sandown touring car race, the boots were flying into young Glenn. But time and again, he displayed the form of a winner. And after showing a heap of promise in 1986, Freddie Gibson and the team gave him a regular ride this year. Glenn didn't let them down. He battled long and hard with Jim Richards, and it was a thrilling season. It all came down to the wire at Sydney's Oran Park. Either could win the title. After some biff and barge that fell in Jim's favour and a turbo malfunction, Glenn ended the series as runner-up. However, he's shown himself to be a champion in every sense.
Glenn Seaton, another member of Toyota's gallery of champs that we're profiling for you during today's great race from Mount Panorama. And we now have the BP race cam up and taking pictures from the rundown to the left-hander at Forest Elbow. Glenn back in the car again. As I mentioned, they've been running very consistently throughout the day, both Peter Jackson Nissan Skylines. The 15 car, 6th on the road at the moment, and right behind him, George Fury in the 30 car.
They really seem hard work, having looked at that car. And if you look at the way Win Percy's ride's going, bouncing about and flicking all over the place. As we said, no aerodynamic aid, so difficult car.
Nissan Skyline, one of the cars to watch in today's race.
This car should have been twice Australian touring car champion, but luck has always deserted it. Racing here for 2 years now, the potent turbo Skyline has shown more than the occasional flash of brilliance. The 2-litre FJ20 engine is quite a package. It's a twin-cam 16-valve 4-cylinder turbo, and it churns out about 340 horsepower. Through 17 by 9-inch rubber, the Skyline tracks well. It stops very effectively and weighs about 1,070 kilograms. The biggest worry for the Skyline pilots is the lack of aerodynamic aids on high-speed courses. Riding the Nissan sure is fast, but it can be pretty wild at Mount Panorama.
So there you have it, the complete package on the Nissan Skyline. Their challenge today in the James Hardie 1000. Heading up to the cutting. And so many people, obviously with their hopes pinned on the BMWs of being around at the business end of the arrangement, and that's between 4 and 5. Another one of the M3s in. Neil Compton with his Motorcraft Pit Report.
Sorry, we've got audio now. We're 20 seconds into this pit stop of Gary Brabhams and Juan Manuel Fangio II, the nephew of the 5-time World Formula 1 champ. And they've been doing a very good job. Consistent, smooth, sure, and at the moment, I'd say they're looking at quite a reasonable finish in the top 10. Gary Brabham has come to terms with this type of racing quite quickly. Fangio now pulls the car out of the pits at a time of 50 seconds. Gary, in fact, ran a touring car at Alton Park in the UK a few months back. It was a Commodore 3 seconds, showing that not only could he win 2 rounds of the British Formula 3 Championship quite comfortably and be up there amongst the point scorers, but he can adapt to cars with roofs as well. In fact, I might try and drag him up if I can. He's just behind us over here. We'll go walkabout. And it's a fairly red face, Gary Brabham. Gary, cars with roofs and windscreens, this is all a bit strange for you.
Yeah, it's, the car's going really well out there. I'm just taking it easy. Mate, I don't want to be the quickest driver out there. I want to be there at the finish, so maybe we get asked back next year.
Yeah. By gee, your career's going well. You've done very well in British Formula 3, and I know you're going back next weekend for a big race, and it looks like you might have carved yourself a career in touring cars as well.
Well, I certainly hope so. My main part is next year is to do the Formula 3000 Championship, but obviously I'd like to do some more touring car races. It's fantastic.
Now, I have to put this one on you because it keeps popping up in papers all over the place. Will there be a Brabham involvement in a Formula One team again in the near future?
Well, I hope to. I don't know when I'm going to get there or not. I just don't give up, keep trying, and one day it'll happen.
Well, things are going fine for you today in the James Hardie 1000, so we look forward to a good result at about 4:30.
Great, thanks very much.
Thanks. That was Gary Brabham.
Car 41 was in 9th position when it went to the pits, and with Juan Manuel Fangio now at the wheel, it's back in 10th spot.
Well, here's the leading BMW M3 in today's James Hardie 1000. It, of course, is the Gianfranco Brancatelli car coming down over the top of the roller coaster towards Caltech's Chase at the moment.
In 4th spot, 1 lap down on the leading division of Dieudonné, Percy and Niedzwitz.
Branca, in fact, has had, of course, some good seasons over the last years. It was BMW to Volvo, Volvo to Rover. Last year was a bit of a letdown, but this year back again with the M3 BMW. He and Johnny Cecotto, they get on well. They're about the same size, and they've gone very well in this car throughout the season.
He's just sensational, Neville, over the top of Mount Panorama. Really is. Okay, recapping them for you on the Castrol scoreboard. Here, Dieudonné leads the great race. Win Percy is in 2nd. Klaus Niedzwitz is 3rd. Brancatelli is 4th, down 1 lap. 5th is Peter Brock, only down 1 lap. 6th, John Bow and Glenn Seaton. 7th, Farmer Fury and Terry Shield. 8th spot held by Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst, 2 laps down. 9th spot, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio. And rounding up the 10:34, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the 2nd OXO Supercube Sierra.
89 of 161 at Mount Panorama for the James Hardie 1000. Still a long way to go, and the sleepers in the field, the Nissans, running strongly, and there's one of them on screen, the basic white in behind this Commodore of Ashby and Reed in the 39 car. This is a nice little duel going on here. The car behind them, of course, the New Zealand Nissan entry, car 24, driven by Kent Bagent and Graham Bowkett. Kent Bagent at the wheel at the moment. On the track, they're running in 27th position.
They had a moment or two here on Friday after the car went into the bank.
Ashby and Reed just up ahead of them in 22nd spot on the racetrack.
That's the Lansvale Smash Repairs Commodore. It's interesting to compare the agility here of the Nissan Skyline as it ducks beneath the Commodore coming into the right-hand kink that we know now as Caltech's Chase.
They fly through there, don't they?
They certainly do. Up to the left-hander, then straight across to the right.
Rather belies the lack of aerodynamics that they claim to have. The front of that car looks a little bit skew-whiffed too, doesn't it?
Not half as bad as it looked here on Friday.
No, true.
The Sleepyhead-sponsored Nissan Skyline, Kent Bagent and Graham Bowkett, should please our New Zealand viewers taking our telecast today through NZBC. They'll be looking forward to their World Touring Car Championship rounds on the streets of Wellington in New Zealand on the 26th of October, the Monday holiday weekend. And of course, 7 Sport will have all the highlights of that exclusive.
Car 60 in the pits. That's the Nissan Gazelle, driven by Mark Scaife and Grant Jarrett. Had a problem on the first lap of the race and were off the track for a number of laps. But up and running again, although at the moment they seem to have a fairly lengthy problem. Let's go down this. We've got some more action in the pits. We can talk now, I think, to John Smith, who's been battling it out for the lead in the 1600cc class. He's with Peter McKay.
Yes, thanks, Gary. John Smith, a perfect scenario today for Toyota Team Australia. 1-2 in the under 1600cc class. You having a ball out there?
No, we're doing it easy too, thank God. And, we worked very hard all year for this, racing in a 2-litre class. When we're finally in a class of our own in a 1.6 with a 1.6 car, we can really show that how well our little cars can go.
It must be a real buzz to be ahead of the English car, the much vaunted English car.
Well, that's right. We wanted to see how good we were against it, and I honestly think now that our cars are probably as good as you'd find anywhere in the world. You know, they're factory built, they're factory prepared, and I think you can't go past it. They are really going well.
There's obviously a great speed differential between cars and cars like the Sierras. How careful have you do you have to be out there? How careful do you have to watch the mirrors?
You have to live in the mirrors. Lucky the Sierra's doing the right thing. They're running with a few lights on so you can see them. But all you see is this blinding flash go past up the hill and they disappear. If you're in their way, you better watch out because it really is hard work. So the wind that goes past the cars goes past us when the Sierras go past is something fantastic.
And there's a big crosswind here today.
Yeah, I didn't really notice it was as bad as it was. Our car was jumping around a little bit on the straight, but I didn't realise it was this bad till I got out of the car.
Looking forward to getting into a bigger car next year, perhaps a turbocharged Supra?
Well, let's hope, eh? Let's just see. There's no decision's been made about it yet, but I'm certainly looking forward to it. If it comes to fruition, we're all looking forward to it.
Good. Thanks, John Smith.
Thank you, Peter McKay. Another of the Bimmers.
Crow and Tulloch, another New Zealand combo in car number 53, BMW M3, and just quietly going about their business in the Wirecard entry, and are in fact in 17th place. Now that's a pretty commendable performance. They don't have the big factory backing, of course, that the European M3s have got, and to be in 17th place at this stage of the race, 91 laps down, they've done well. Car 43. Another of the BMW. They always seem to be in and out of the pits, but they do it quickly and unobtrusively. Neil Crompton is there.
Indeed, they do, Gary Wilkinson. 15 seconds down. This car is the Bugatti Motorsport BMW M3. It's being driven by 3 drivers today: Winnie Vogt, Alfred Hagar, and Olivier Grouillard. And at the moment, they're just attending the ever-present problem of high temperatures under the bonnet. They're also trying to get a bit of oil in there. I noticed this car isn't on our leaderboard down here. You might be able to update me a bit later as to what's going on. But Grouillard now getting out of the car. That's Hagar sitting in the left-hand side. And this stop is becoming tragically long. 48 seconds down.
Maybe that explains why they're in 25th place.
Thank you, Wilco. Yeah, that's not good news for them. And when they've got nothing to do except wash the windscreen, you know they've got problems. 1 minute and 2 seconds down. Timing by the calendar here at the moment, Wilco. They've still got problems with this car. Winnie Vogt on the other side, you'll see him. He's the 42-year-old winner of this year's European Touring Car Championship. Young, should I say, fellow, not young. And a very accomplished driver. I know that Richard Hay speaks very highly of his efforts. He did a great job, I think, in this year's Spa 24-hour, did he not?
Yes, he did. I think the big problem here is the seat on this car, isn't it? Nothing more uncomfortable.
Yeah, they've got a major problem. That's almost like a John Goss problem from a couple of years ago when the seat was moving around in the car. I noticed that as the cameras went past. They're trying desperately to tighten it on the floor. So, woes continue for the BMW team. That is a very long and costly pit stop.
Yeah, they've been in now for exactly 2 minutes, Mike, and they're working pretty frantically on the front left here, just to our side now. They've got it mobile. 2 minutes and 6 seconds.
Thank you, Neil. Well, they return to the race, and Trevor Crow continues his march towards the lead. However, it's a Sierra very high on Mount Panorama today. Grice Commodore still running second in the great race. And there goes young Winston hurrying up the hill. It's just incredible to me that their car is still running so smoothly, the rebuilt car after the accident on Friday.
Not only that, of course, still running with the temperature gauge flashing, which it's been doing now for some 2 hours. And still, apparently, going no slower. It seems to have run into no problems at all. And he's looking good for a strong finish.
It was interesting that Andrew Madico went past him a minute or two ago and has now gone away from him. But, of course, he's some way back, so he's got nothing to worry about as far as he's concerned.
Great pictures from the Bob Jane T-Mart's race cam. And I think you could expect to see Wynne Percy and Grice come up as a formidable combination next week in the Touring Car World Championship round at Calder Park.
Very much
in Melbourne
so.
On that high-banked Thunderdome.
Very much so.
The Commodores are just sensational to watch there.
And Grice would be the only man in the race, would he not, apart from possibly Cross, would have any experience of the Thunderdome.
Yes, although I have a feeling that the European boys will catch on quickly, Richard.
Percy was telling me it absolutely terrified him. Grice took him around there in a road car and he just could not believe how fast a car would go around the banking. But Grice, of course, competed in the 300 in America.
So that car goes through, looking at the Grice Percy car and how it has climbed up and gone down and then, of course, gone back into second spot on our progress chart. Keeping in mind that it really hasn't been out of the top 5 all day. They had a lightning fast pit stop. And Win Percy, because of his vast experience in very heavy cars, is making life very much easier for his co-driver, Alan Grice, here today.
Very, very, very consistent performance by Win. And it just proves the point that Tom Walkinshaw made.
Trouble here for the Brian Callahan, Barry Graham, Mobile Concrete Pumping Services Commodore. Now this car was running 14th and Brian Callahan was headed for the pit area and it has just stopped. What wretched luck for those two guys. I know there'll be a lot of oval track followers around Australia who have tuned in to see the fortunes of Callahan and Graham and Tony Noski and Gary Rush here today. It looks like their race is run. Win Percy about to be harried by a BMW M3 across the top of the mountain as they head up to West End Bend. Now heading to Reed Park. Watch just how smooth Percy is here across the top of Mount Panorama. Particularly the next turn as it comes up. This is where he went off. He came through here on Friday, caught the back wheel out there, flicked him around and straight off into the concrete wall.
Doesn't seem to have affected him at all. He still ran the car up on the curve there.
No, he's a great professional. Let's recap the present situation on the Castrol scoreboard for you. Pierre Dieudonné leads the great race, lap 94. Second is Win Percy. Third place held by Klaus Niedwitz and one of the Sierras in at the moment. Fourth by Chicotto and Brancatelli. Fifth by good old Brocky, McLeod and Crook. Sixth place, Glenn Seaton and John Bow. Seventh, Fury and Shield in the second of the Nissans. They're 2 laps down. They're 3 laps down in 44, Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst. Right behind them, Gary Brabham and Juan Manuel Fangio. And then rounding out the 10, 34, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the second Oxo Supercube Sierra. The Sierra joins the race and we'll be back in a moment. And problems for Win Percy and the Alan Grice Commodore. We'll go back to that in a second. Car number 27. The Golson and Golson entry is in the pit area. The father and son combination. Meanwhile, at the top of Mount Panorama, Win Percy is just trying to limp around. We might be able to see if we can get to Win in just a second for a chat.
Shades of Tasmania there in the Simmons Plains race.
The dramas continue in the James Hardie 1000. The second place, Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. Win Percy at the wheel. Came to almost an abrupt stop on top of the mountain. Fortunately, he hit a downhill patch. I don't know if Win's listening to us at the moment. Win, what seems to be the problem?
It's pretty serious, whatever it is.
Well, he shut it down by the sound of it. In fact, if he has, it doesn't sound healthy at all.
It sounds like the bottom's about to drop out of the car. Can't get any real indication here. Bill O'Brien goes past along with one of the Oxo Sierras.
It sounds very like the diff, and the diff temperature was right off the gauge, and I think that's possibly where it's coming from, but it's a question of wait and see.
More lights than a Christmas tree on the dash of the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore.
And reminds me of the Australian touring car race in Tasmania where Gracie ran the car and all the gauges were right off the clock. And it looked a fairly similar state of affairs to that.
There's the number 2 Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. Heading back to pit lane. whether or not Winkin just coasted down through the Caltex chase. You can hear the noise coming out of the car. Our crews are already down there. Just while they're waiting for the car to come in, I'm sure that Gianfranco Brancatelli and, of course, Johnny Cicotto won't be terribly happy about
news from the
stewards of the meeting, which I'll read to you as soon as we get this this pit stop. I think it'll be a final pit stop for the number 2 Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. It would appear, though, yes, that says it all. Alan Grice stands just watching the car roll in to the pits. Win Percy gave the race a great shake. So too did Alan Grice in those hectic opening laps. There's Les Small, they're on the scene. And so too are our pit reporters.
Yes, Mike, Win Percy gets out of the car, and immediately the lads all duck to the back of the vehicle. And you've probably got a better idea of what was going on from our Bob Jane T-Mart's race cam than I have. But quite obviously there's a terminal problem with either the differential or axles or both. Yeah, Gricey's onto it. Win's just to my right. We'll have a chat with him as soon as he's finished with Alan. Win, any indication of what the problem is?
Yeah, it's the axle.
Right. Well, it's as simple as that. Axle failure in the Bob Jane T-Mart's Commodore. You'll notice if we just come round to the right a little bit more that the rear end is just covered in oil. If you look down inside there, we just bob down a little bit, and look at that. What a mess. Boy, you can have some drama in this great race. The top of the mountain is a pretty cruel piece of road. Now the lads have a very big job in front of them. They've got to disassemble the hub, start fiddling around with the rear end. I'm not quite sure how long that process is likely to take, I should say. And they're going to be in here for quite some time. Incidentally, the lead Texaco Ford Sierra came in just a couple of moments back, and he had Dudonne handed back over to Steve Soper. The stop was about 38 seconds long.
And they retained the lead despite that stop now.
Yeah, and they're doing a fine job. I had Pierre lined up a couple of moments ago, and we'll go back there shortly and we'll have a chat with him, and he's very happy with the car, although he's got a small problem in the front end, he said. We'll enlighten ourselves on that just a little bit later on, but this really is bad news. We'll go for the Bob Jane car. They've done so well. When you consider the heartbreak involved in taking the front off their car on Friday, Win is a thorough and true professional, and he was looking forward to a good result at the mountain. Of course, he finished, I think, second in 1985. So it's very disappointing indeed.
Okay, thanks, Neil. What that does to the positions overall now in the race, of course, Steve Soper leads once more in the Texaco car from teammate Klaus Niedewitz in the second Texaco entry. Now, Brancatelli is supposed to be running third, but that may not be the case.
No, I rather doubt that now, because they've incurred a 3-minute penalty because Johnny Cicotto passed the pace car. If you recall, in the earlier this morning, and the stewards of the meeting have issued a 3-minute penalty. So guess who is coming up on the ladder?
Let's say provisionally they're third still, but the man in fourth place, and possibly third, depending on how that penalty works out, is Peter Brock.
There's Brocky now, car number 10, going beneath the Bridgestone Bridge.
And coming to the pits.
So it's all happening.
Brock is at the wheel of this car. Of course, the 05 car failed to survive the early laps here today in the James Hardie 1000. But Brock, of course, cross-ended for the second dealer team car, took over the wheel and has done a fairly lengthy stint in it. But we're about to see another driver change. Peter McLeod drove the early laps here. By the way, both the Eggenberger Texaco cars with Soper and Niedewitz are now 1 lap clear of the rest of the field.
Well, the situation now with 20 seconds down in this stop, Wilco, is that David Parsons gets into car number 10. Hope they don't scratch it. And Peter Brock jumps out. So it doesn't look as though John Crook's going to have a gallop at Mount Panorama today. Peter McLeod having done the first stint, as you quite rightly pointed out. They changed front brake pads just a few moments ago. George Smith just down in front of me here. 40 seconds gone. It's a pretty good stop when you consider they've put pads in. Tim releases the jacks and away they go. 45 seconds, red hot stop from the dealer team.
They're going back out of the racetrack. Meantime, on the Castrol scoreboard, lap number 98, Soper Giudoni car continues to lead. Ludwig and Nieswitz, Cicotto and Brancatelli with a question mark over that. Percy and Grice have just bitten the dust. That brings Brock, Crook and Peter McLeod up a couple of spots. They're just ahead of Glenn Seaton and John Vow. Right behind them, George Fury and Terry Shield. Then comes Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst down 2 laps, in company with Bradman and Manuel Fangio. Then, of course, Giddings and Stewart rounding out the top 10.
Laps down out of 161 in the James Hardie 1000, and whilst the Eggenberger Sierras continue to lead the race, Soper and Niedwitz up front, Peter Brock's car running strongly. Of course, the 05 car is out, the number 10 car is running. David Parsons is at the wheel, but there is no doubt the man that masterminds the mobile dealer team effort is Peter Brock, the winningest man at Mount Panorama, the top name in touring car racing.
Jeffrey Brock is the king of the mountain. The 42-year-old veteran has roared in his Holden more often at Mount Panorama than any other driver. With 8 Hardie wins, 3 touring car titles and 9 Sandown victories, Brock has been on centre stage for 15 years. Brocky kicked his first goal at Bathurst way back in 1972, driving Harry Firth's Holden dealer team XU1 Tirana. That opened the door on a brilliant career for the then 27-year-old. Through the evolution of racing, Holden shone the kid from Hurstbridge. The floodgates opened in 1978 on board the V8 A9X Tirana, and along with co-driver Jim Richards, the pair combined to achieve a hat-trick. In 1980, the Commodore arrived on the scene. Over the next 5 years, Brock and his partners John Harvey and Larry Perkins won 4 of the races. Since the introduction of Group A, Brock hasn't claimed a victory. However, recent performances in the mobile Commodore show that it may not be far away. From the Toyota Gallery of Champions, Peter Brock.
And Peter Brock is certainly the man to watch. They are presently position number 6 in the great race. And don't discount Peter Brock coming good a little later this afternoon. The car is still running strongly. Brock has handed over, of course, to co-drivers for the next hour and a half of the race, and we expect to see him back in. Maybe it's time now for our Peter Jansen, car number 3, Petrotech Commodore, that was originally entered by our Wollongong favourite Peter McLeod, Shell Harbour, I should say. He picked up the drive with the mobile team, and then, of course, when the Alpha team didn't arrive from Italy, the organisers accepted a number of the reserve cars into the field. This was one of them. Peter Fitzgerald sharing with the captain, Peter Jansen, here today. I tell you, it's been a while since the captain put the helmet on.
Yes, he hasn't been to Mount Panorama for a while. Always colourful, always likely to come up with the unexpected. But it's been his forte, long-distance racing, and he's put up some remarkable finishing efforts here in the great race in previous years, and it wouldn't be surprising to see them put up a strong showing again here this afternoon. Car 4 on screen, Graham Moore, Michelle Delcourt in the Strathfield Car Radios Commodore. They were in 14th position when they came in for this pit stop. Michelle Delcourt, a former Rookie of the Year, believe it or not, here at Mount Panorama, getting out of the car. Graham Moore taking over, also a veteran of racing here, former class winner at Mount Panorama. Drove in Europe this year with Michelle Delcourt. They drove a Commodore, owned in Belgium, prepared in France, built in Australia. They have a little difficulty with the seating in the car because Michelle is a big bloke.
He's a proper sized bloke.
And not that Graham's any midget, but Michelle is a big fella, and they had a fair bit of trouble getting the seating set up just right so that it could alternately accommodate them without too much rearrangement. Men under the car there working, so obviously it's a little more than a routine pit stop.
They've been running as high as 14th. The motto of the team, of course, is drive in and jive away.
Not too much jiving at the moment.
The Strathfield Car Radios Commodore. They've done it on a very limited budget, Bathurst 87.
car built by Bob Stevens. The engine, of course, the car prepared by Bob Stevens, who knows how to build strong cars. I think they'll see it out, but whatever the problem is now is costing them precious moments in the pits.
Neil Crompton is in the pits. Yeah, Maury's in the car at the moment, and we might just have a quick yarn with him if we can. Graham, this is a slow stop. What's going on?
We've got a slight vibration. The CV joint is pumping a little bit of oil and grease out, so as a precautionary measure, we're putting some oil into the CV joint.
You happy with the way things are going other than that?
Yeah, we're just running a slow race, and we just plan to finish in the top 10. That's our go.
You've done a magnificent job of presenting the car this weekend.
Thanks, Neil. We try to do the best for our sponsors. That's what it's all about. And we just got to get in here and do our best.
Okay, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks, Graham. So Graham Moore, a slow stop. They've got a problem with the CV joint. They're working on it at the moment.
There's Captain Peter Jansen in the Petro Tech Commodore V8. Of course, the Commodore's feeling the pinch just a little against the Sierras today, but they're still a very competitive car, as any Australian racing fan would tell you.
The All-Aussie V8 is still the most popular mount, with the majority of the field doing battle in today's James Hardie 1000. The racing Commodore evolved from a need to do well at the mountain, and for the last 7 years, that's exactly what it's done. If you need old dogs for hard roads, then the not-so-complex local projectile is just right. This 5-litre V8 is tough, fast and strong. It's also the oldest design of the favoured cars. The razor-sharp engines can produce just on 440 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. Its biggest problem, though, is putting it to the ground through smallish rubber. Stopping the Holden is done via 14 and 12-inch front and rear brakes, and weight is the car's greatest handicap. It's much heavier than its nearest rivals, but the Commodores will circulate all day.
And wait for a while, Graham Moore had to, but he's back out and circulating again in the Strathfield Car Radio's Commodore V8, heading up Motorcraft Hill towards BP Cutting again. And they have an uncanny record of consistency here at Mount Panorama. Expect to see them, providing they don't have problems, in the top 10 a little later this afternoon.
Well, they had a 7th place finish last year with basically the same crew they've got this year, and I guess an even smaller budget. But they're doing well, and so is Steve Soper, who leads the field for Eggenberger Texaco, and teammate Klaus Ludwig, or Klaus Niedwitz, at the wheel in 2nd place. Brancatelli, the car of the 42 BMW, is in 3rd spot, but remember, they've got a 3-minute penalty. Then comes Glenn Seaton in the number 15 Nissan, holding down 4th, and teammate George Fury in 5th place.
6th spot is the Brockbrook McLeod Commodore. 7th, Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst. 8th, 41, Brabham and Fangio, 2 laps down. 9th, 34, Giddings and Stewart in the 2nd Ford Sierra. 10th spot, 45, Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finau. 11th spot, Gary Scott and Akihiko Nakaya. 12th is veteran Murray Carter and Steve Masterton. They're 4 laps down, as you can see. 13th, Andrew Medecky and Don Smith. They're 5 laps down, in company with Graham Moore and Michelle Delcourt. 15th spot, 26, Speedway's Tony Noski and Gary Rush.
Position number 16 on the track, Trevor Crowe, Ian Tulloch from New Zealand in the BMW. Position 17, Steve Reed, Trevor Ashby in the Commodore, 5 laps down. Position 18, Tony Cabbage, Kerry Bailey, also in a Commodore, 5 laps down. The same goes for Peter Jansen and Peter Fitzgerald in spot 19. Position 20, Alan Grice and Wynne Percy. Well, that's terminal. They're still in the pits.
21, Tony Mulvihill and Ken Matthews. They're 6 laps down. Then look, 22, car number 40, Osterreich and Ratzenberger. They're 8 down. So too Golson and Golson, father and son. Then 9 spots down, Winnie Vaught and Gruyard. Then follows Bill O'Brien and the Everlast Commodore and Brian Sampson, 9 apiece.
Faulkner and Price in car number 90 in 26th spot. Then John Smith in car number 91, holding down 27th, 10 laps down, reminding you. 13 laps down, Ratcliffe and Gibbs, also in a Toyota. Then the Nissan car 60, the Gazelle of Mark Scaife and Grant Jarrett in position 29. And car 30, 17 laps down, Brian Callahan and Barry Graham.
Rounding off, 31, Bajan and Bowkett in the Nissan privately added from New Zealand. 32nd spot, veteran Bob Holden, Gary Wilmington, they're 21 laps down. Then Bagnall and Jennings in the Toyota, Cameron and Wilkinson, and then 32 laps down, car 35, Phil Ward and Lyndon Riefmuller. They're the positions. Now Castrol scoreboard. Of 161 of the James Hardie 1000 Classic from Mount Panorama. We're going to take the BP race cam with Glenn Seaton, and we have an interesting dice developing here. The battle for 3rd on the road. between Gianfranco Brancatelli and Glenn Seaton. If you recall, we told you earlier the stewards had indicated they were going to penalise Johnny Cecotto for passing the pace car earlier today. Cecotto's now back in the car. Brancatelli handing over to him just a little earlier. Now, even without that 3-minute penalty, Seaton is gaining all the time on Cecotto as they head up Mountain Straight.
Doing a superb job, as Mike Raymond said, and he really does know how to put this car around the circuit neatly, cleanly. And
there's trouble for the Oxo Supercube car. Peter McKay is on the spot. Tell us what's happening, Pete.
You've got major problems.
Just the alternator's gone on it. It's been playing up for an hour and a half now. And she just won't build up any charge at all. You know, we've changed one battery, but we'll have to change the alternator now. It's mucking up the engine too much with not enough power in the system, you know. So we'll have to change the alternator, put another battery in it, and hopefully we'll get going again. So we'll do some more test miles.
Okay, this is the car that led the race, and there was some suggestions that they'd have transmission problems. No problems in that area?
Brakes, transmissions, differential, everything's working beautiful. It's just the alternator's played up. We've had a little bit of trouble with him early in the year, and I think it's just these new Evolution engines. We're running 1,000 revs higher than what we normally run, and we compensate with a different pulley, you know. But the alternator's not up to the job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Donnie. Thanks, Pete. Don, having a bit of a chat there. He's the man who actually got the Oxo Supercube team together. And as we've mentioned before, about 8.6 seconds the difference between our two Texaco cars, and they hold a 1-lap advantage now over Glenn Seaton in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline.
Steve Soper, of course, driving the lead car, number 6 at the moment. His co-driver today, Pierre Dieudonné, is in the pit area with Neil Crompton.
Yes, I'm lucky enough to have Pierre with me at the moment, and he's the man who did such a fine job in that middle stint of the race before handing over to Steve Soper. I think the pit stop was around about 38 to 40 seconds long, and you said to me when you got out of the car, Pierre, that you thought there was something a little astray with the front of the car. What was the problem?
Well, after the pace car incident, when the race was restarted, either coming together when I overtook the Oxo Sierra, and we collide, and it bent the front wheel on my car, so I had to stop for a check and change the wheel. And after that, I found that the track, the front geometry was off, so the car is now very difficult to drive. But I think we can keep up a good pace anyway.
Your impressions of our circuit here at Mount Panorama in Australia, is it a circuit you enjoy driving on?
Oh, I really love it. Okay, it's dangerous, it's demanding, but that's why we are here for. And I think it's a great pity that such circuits are disappearing around the world, so we are very happy to come and race here.
Well, we're very pleased to have your company this weekend. We wish you the best of luck, and at the moment you're doing things very nicely. You have the lead with the James Hardie 1000. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil Crompton. Nice to see you had Pierre Dieudonné with you. I hope you've also got your raincoat with you, because it is about to bucket down at Mount Panorama. Our 7-chopper pilot, Frank Van Ries, reports very, very heavy showers just the other side of the mountain and heading in this direction. It could put a different complexion on the top 10 in the great race for 1987.
It certainly could. There's number 6, race leader Steve Soper. Checking out the Castrol scoreboard, he leads from teammate Klaus Ludwig and Klaus Niedzwitz. Third spot, 15, Glenn Seaton and John Bowe. Fourth spot, Johnny Cecotto and Gianfranco Brancatelli in the BMWs, 2 back. Then George Fury and Terry Shield in the second Nissan, they're 2 down. 6th spot held by Brocky, Crook and McLeod. 7th spot by Jimmy Richards and Tony Longhurst. 8th by Brabham and Fangio, they're 3 down. 9th spot, 34, John Giddings and Bruce Stewart in the second Ford Sierra. And 10th spot, 45, Robbie Francevic and Ludwig Finauer. It's cut and dried. Think again.
Might be cut.
110 of 161 laps completed, and what looks like a fierce storm moving in over Mount Panorama. Spots of rain already appearing on the screen of Glenn Seaton's Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline.
And along the pit lane, Mark, the team managers frantic, the crews getting out the wet weather tyres in preparation for a swarm of pit stops as the showers sweep in, driven by a very strong west to southwest wind. The flag standing out, the spectators running for cover. There isn't too much of it around here.
Steve Soper.
Steve is a very good wet weather driver, but he won't be looking forward to this at all. That's what he'll be looking forward to, rain tyres.
BMW wet weather tyres already out, and his co-drivers, of course, the Eggenberger team. Just a section of the huge crowd here on the mountain today. So for some of the Texaco Sierra drivers, or two in particular, they could have a very wet class.
There is just nowhere on top of the mountain, or indeed in some of the areas here at the bottom of Conrod Strait. Look at that, it's really starting to get quite heavy.
Certainly is. They're making the run down through Caltex Chase now to the left-hander. You can expect to see an absolute belt in here to the pits by all of the leading cars. There's not too